Oh, I can't have this on me. There we go. A saber. Somewhat fitting. Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Breakdown. My name's Daniel Green, and today I'm going to be going over all the publishing information you need to know about the First Law series. This is the third episode of The Breakdown, and if you've been paying attention, you'll probably realize the information given in each episode is a little bit different. That's because I'm still trying to grow and evolve this series, and the best way for that to happen as quickly and efficiently as possible is for you all to let me know in the comments down below what information you like seeing being within these episodes, and what you think is too spoilery. That being said, for the First Law, for the first time, I'm going to be including some lore information about the series I'm going over. So if you have no idea what exactly the First Law is, at the end of the video you might have a little bit more inkling of whether or not you'd like to read it, while still being chock full of information that returning fans of the series might like to know about its publication. As always though, I'm going to do my best to keep this absolutely spoiler-free, which I've realized after doing this a couple times means I really need to avoid character information, so you won't be getting a lot of that. Without any further ado though, let's go ahead and jump into the First Law trilogy. The First Law was written by Joseph Abercrombie, aka Lord Grimdark on Twitter, which is apparently a moniker he a little bit regrets now. Yet it is still a bit fitting because outside of the series that have been adapted to the big screen, First Law is often seen as a flagship for the grimdark side of the fantasy genre. Now, what might be nice to know about the First Law trilogy before getting into it is that it is set in a medieval-esque, war-torn, European-esque fantasy world, with other kingdoms and empires that are more reminiscent of the Mediterranean or the Middle East as well. While the First Law series is most known for being grimdark, I also like to let people know it's also extremely politically oriented. A whole lot of the drama and action first is set up through a lot of politicking. If you've really liked the last couple episodes of House of the Dragon, for example, where a lot of the drama is based off of political maneuvering and realistic characters' reaction to that maneuvering, First Law might just be for you. What really sets First Law apart though from a lot of its fantastical counterparts is that the fantasy elements are extraordinarily minimal. While there is a lore-filled backstory, how the world used to be inhabited by both demons and humans, really what you'll see now in terms of the fantastical elements is extremely pulled back compared to most fantasy series. The end result is a fascinating blend of a world that, without a doubt, is an epic fantasy, yet feels far more grounded and gritty in a lot of ways outside of just how brutal the narrative is. The setting and immersion of the reader itself maintain an extraordinarily realistic feel, despite an over-the-top, almost Tarantino-esque approach to a lot of the violence that does occur within the series. Now, what exactly the First Law is, I'll let you find out while reading the series. But now, let's get a little bit more detailed into the setting. Now, unfortunately for this section, Joe Abercrombie doesn't really like including big old country maps within his books. I disagree. I think including maps is a fantastic thing, and not limiting at all, Joe, as long as you frickin' So anyway, I won't be able to show you really nice maps of the world during this part, but I'll do my best, because there are still some maps that exist for the series. First up, we have the Union, and this is going to be where a lot of this story takes place. Reminiscent of Western and Central European society during the same period the series overall is inspired from, the Union is where the reader will probably end up feeling the most comfortable. Then we have the Gurkish Empire, which according to the Wikipedia for First Law, is largely inspired by the Middle East and antiquity. I include that just to let you know that, yeah, I'm absolutely for a lot of the information in these videos, skimming Wikipedia, as well as the fandom wikis, and interviews with authors just to get clarifying details. There's also an area called the North. It's exactly what you think it is. Every fantasy series, it's the North that you see there. Then we have Styria, which is a series of city-states that are often involved in conflict. And then the Old Empire, which is one of my favorite tropes in fantasy, the great kingdom that was, that has been reduced to a shadow of itself, with the Union often being seen as the new power of the world. And then the Far Country, which is something that every fantasy author needs for the world, the distant lands that not too much is known about so that eerie things can be said about it. All of these factions war and play against each other throughout the First Law series, and that's going to bring us to actually talking about the publication of the books. The First Law book came out May 4th, 2006. The Blade itself. With 529 pages, this 191,000 word epic made a splash, receiving near universal positive reviews upon its release. I do share maybe one of the biggest criticisms this early First Law book received, which is that it's lacking in plot, but I think it more than makes up for that in its world-building, alternative feel to what's common in fantasy, and most importantly, in the thing you'll hear most often said about Joe Abercrombie's writing, the fantastic characters. This was followed up up pretty quickly March 15th of 2007 with Before They Are Hanged, a 539-page follow-up. Before They Were Hanged was in the same ballpark in terms of number of words as the first book, with 198,000 words. And as you'll notice, compared to at least the last couple of breakdown videos, these are a bit shorter than a lot of the other fantasy epics you'll see within the genre. They're not novellas by any means, but they're not the 300 to 400,000 page massive drops that we get from a lot of fantasy authors. In fact, as you'll see, First Law has never broken the 300,000 word mark, but the original First Law trilogy ended with The Last Argument of Kings, released March 20th of 2008 with 603 pages and 234,000 words. The Last Argument of Kings proved not only Joe Abercrombie could put out consistently high quality work, but he could do it year after year, something that not many fandoms within the fantasy genre are blessed with. It actually reminds me of the Malazan series, and how rapidly Steven Erikson was able to put out those gargantuan masterpieces. Here, Joe Abercrombie's doing the same with a slimmer page count but a faster pace. But Abercrombie did not slow down just because his trilogy was over. Riding off the success of these books, he continued with a series of standalones, all taking place within the same world, and arguably you definitely should read the First Law trilogy before getting into any of these, but they're all extraordinarily readable on their own, including my favorite of the standalones, the first one released, titled Best Served Cold. Released June of 2009, Best Served Cold was the second longest First Law book yet, with 227,000 words and 534 pages. It's not unheard of to see an author come back to a series they've established to write from perspective of new characters, new storylines, and just continue existing in the world. But few have done it to such great success as Joe Abercrombie, with many of his standalone First Law entries being ranked among fans' favorites. And maybe the most common answer I get when I ask people what their favorite First Law book is the second standalone released, The Heroes. Released January of 2011, containing 506 pages or 203,000 words, The Heroes is the story of a battle, structured around just the experience of one battle. This is the most unique First Law book, and a lot of people point to as an example of what makes the series continually so interesting to return to. Joe Abercrombie has been quoted saying that a lot of his standalone books, he likes to look at a certain genre of film and just try and write an entry of his world that would fit that genre of film. And it was followed up by his Western approach to the First Law world, Red Country, released in October of 2012 with 451 pages or 172,000 words. Aside from a series of short stories we're going to get to, Red Country is the shortest of the full First Law books. And also, while I still definitely like it, my own personal least favorite. I wonder if that lines up with the fact that I just don't like Westerns as a genre. But maintaining a long tradition all the way back to Tolkien, Joe Abercrombie has written also a series of short stories within his world that do not earn even the novella status, but have been put together and released as one book. And that would be Sharp Ends. Released in April of 2016, Sharp Ends is only 102,000 words long, 103 if you round up. And it's the only First Law entry on this list that I haven't personally read. In fact, I wasn't aware of its existence until I did research for this video. I need to get to that. I love First Law. Now you'll notice one of the things that I haven't included in this video that I have in previous breakdowns is overall reception and reviews for these books. And I'd like to take a moment here to just say it's because nearly every single one of these books had almost identical sounding reviews. People just praising the character work, putting them constantly at 8s, 9s, 10s. It was a lot like Malazan and started to feel a bit redundant. The only entry I saw some contention around whether or not it was as good as the rest was the collection of short stories, Sharp Ends. But this takes us to maybe First Law's boldest change yet, and that is going to be a generational step forward. And that would be in the second First Law trilogy, the Age of Madness trilogy. Kicking off with a Little Hatred, released September 19th of 2019. Little Hatred had 471 pages or 177,000 words. Was Joe Abercrombie able to keep nearly all of the audience he built up with the standalones and the original trilogy? Well, publication information is still pretty hard to come by, but I believe it's fairly safe to say, due to the number of overwhelmingly positive reviews, yes. I can't really get into character or world stuff here without spoiling things from the original First Law trilogy, which is frustrating, but when a large percent of the cast is descendants from characters you know and it can spoil how long people live to get into it, I'm just going to move on here. But before I do, say something that I thought was going to be a controversial opinion to have when I originally finished The Age of Madness, but with the number of people I've seen agreeing with me, I don't necessarily think that's the case anymore, but I prefer Age of Madness over the original First Law trilogy. I think Abercrombie as a writer improved, shored up some of the few weaknesses he had, and put out a trilogy that is firmly in the masterpiece status for me. But Little Hatred was followed by The Trouble with Peace, released September 15th of 2020, containing 506 pages or 195,000 words. The Trouble with Peace certainly does not suffer from middle book syndrome. That's as much as I can. Spoilers. And The Age of Madness ended in 2021 with possibly the best titled book that Abercrombie has ever put out, The Wisdom of Crowds. With 560 pages or 199,000 words, The Wisdom of Crowds, after sitting on it for a while, has become my favorite First Law book. And I love being able to say that. There's nothing more assuring as a fan of an author, being able to say not only have I found their books to be consistently getting better, but their last release is my favorite of their releases. And that's the First Law series. More books are planned to be released within this world, at least according to the author himself, and there's maybe no other series I am more consistently excited for releases from and think, yes, it absolutely has a lot more story to tell, and I cannot wait to continue to step forward with these characters and see what even possibly another generational step forward could bring. This has been The Breakdown. Like and subscribe if you have not already. Hit the Patreon if you'd like to support what I do here, and let me know in the comments down below how you'd like to see this series shift and change in the future. Have a good one, y'all. I got books, I got merch. Peace.